Krishna. Introducing Maharaj in his presence is probably the most anxious part of the retreat. So anyway, we'll try our best. His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Swami Maharaj completed his BA. That's what I meant saying. So anyway, we'll skip that part. It is, as I said, most anxious part of the retreat. But I'll try to actually say something from Srimad Bhagavatam, and we can take note of that as the central point on how we should receive Maharaj's message. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a nice verse said by Prithu Maharaj in 4th canto, chapter 20th, text number 25. Here Prithu Maharaj says, Savuttama shloka mahatmukhachuto bhavatpadamboj sudhakanalina smriti punavismriti tattva vartmani kuyogi namno vitarati alambare. Translation. My dear Lord, you are glorified by the selected verses uttered by great personalities. Such glorification of your lotus feet is just like saffron mercy particles. When the transcendental vibration from the mouths of great devotees carries the aroma of the saffron dust of your lotus feet, the forgetful living entities gradually remembers his eternal relationship with you. Devotees thus gradually come to the right conclusion about the value of life. My dear Lord, I therefore do not need any other benediction but the opportunity to hear from the mouth of your pure devotee. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes a very nice point that a pure devotee always engages in the service of the Lord, taking shelter of his lotus feet, and therefore he has direct connection with the saffron mercy particles that are strewn over the lotus feet of the Lord. Although when a pure devotee speaks, the articulation of his voice may resemble the sound of material sky, the voice is spiritually very powerful because it touches the particles of saffron dust on the lotus feet of the Lord. As soon as sleeping living entities hears the powerful voice emanating from the mouth of a pure devotee, he immediately remembers his eternal relationship with the Lord, although up till that moment he had forgotten everything. So let's take this as a benchmark and give our ears to Maharaj's Vani and embrace it in our heart for this nice seminar on the culture of speech. His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj ki Jai. Jai. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. We'll do a little kirtan. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya
Acharya, Ashtotara Sadhya Divine Grace of Her Charanaravinda, Bhakti Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath ki Jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki Jai, Shri Shri Jagannath Baladeva Subhadra Devi ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanand. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumneekam Yena Tasmai Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manojishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swavadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudhagadalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagadaratanakantikam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sasitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagadalalita Shri Vishakamitamscha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vesthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nidhamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Vicharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshadharine Vancha Talpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Jalevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I am very happy to be here in your midst this morning. We'll be together for 2 days now and having some discussions on the culture of speech. I'm happy to see so many of you here today. So let us avoid any other speech that will not help us to progress in our spiritual life, in particular in these 2 days. When I initially mooted this idea or this topic, when the proposal of having a retreat came up, and I was asked what topic I would like to speak on, and I chose this topic, the culture of speech. There was some element of surprise and bafflement that what could possibly be spoken for 2 whole days on the topic of culture of speech. And so is there enough matter to cover 2 days? Can we really have a 2-day seminar on a topic like this? Actually, we speak all day, every day. So, all of us, we speak all day, every day. So, speaking is not an issue. The question is speaking to the point, speaking of the subject, and speaking things that will be useful. However, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, all of us have been exposed to a philosophy and a culture which is so deep, which is so wide, which is so illuminating that it sheds light on practically every topic that is necessary for us to hear about and learn. And because we speak so much every day, speech forms a very important part of our life. All day long, all the living entities are speaking, even the birds, the animals. And the birds and animals, of course, speak mostly on topics of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And therefore, humans also who are not spiritually adept also speak about eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. However, that is not what distinguishes human beings from animals. Human beings can speak on topics that the animals can't speak on. Now, we shouldn't think, well, the animals can't speak on computers and they can't speak on politics. Well, that doesn't matter. It means that these things are not of prime importance to human life. If there is something that the humans can speak, which the animals can't, and which is ultimately conducive to the highest welfare of the human beings, that is the kind of speech that is required. The urge to speak is so strong, irrepressible, uncontrollable. People may fast for a day or two from food with difficulty, but we do it. On Janmashtami we may fast till midnight. On Gaur Purnima we fast till sunset. On Ram Navami we may fast till noon. On many days we fast till noon. We manage. But when we are told to not speak for a long time, don't speak for the whole day, that is very hard. Unless you're living all alone. And usually we don't live all alone, we're living with people. So it's very hard to not speak. And because this urge is so powerful, if someone manages to control that, then the person acquires tremendous power. There is a saying amongst the yogis that those who observe what is called as the Maun Vrat, the vow of silence for a certain span of time, acquire what they call the Vak Siddhi. Vak means speech, Siddhi means perfection. So because they have controlled their speech in such a way that they haven't spoken for years together, they develop a certain, supposedly, develop a certain power which aligns their speech with reality in the sense that they can speak about what will happen in the future. Not that they can see the future, not that they determine the future, but whatever they speak just happens. Tomorrow is going to be 30 degrees centigrade, happens. There's going to be a quarrel between these two people, it happens. But ultimately, even such Vak Siddhi, even in cases where it may genuinely happen, is not of much spiritual value. I remember in 1989 or 88, there was a Kumbh Mela in Allahabad, Prayag. Purna Kumbh, the full Kumbh. As you know, that's the largest gathering, religious gathering on earth. Millions of people gather there. So when I went there, I remember that everybody was talking, the whole talk of that festival there, apart from so many other things, was that there was a certain renunciant, a certain mendicant, who was residing up on a tree, in a tree house. And he was said to have not spoken a word for 12 years continuously, because of which it is said he had the Vak Siddhi. So I'll still remember his name and his form, although I won't mention it. And we were passing by and we were told there is such and such Baba and he has not spoken for 12 years. And so there were hordes and hordes of people, thousands of people had come just to see him because he hadn't spoken for 12 years. That is how people are fascinated with the idea that somebody has been able to control his tongue, his sense of speech. He has not spoken a single word From the genuinely spiritual point of view, the Krishna conscious point of view, we can understand that silence is helpful in the sense that it's better than speaking nonsense. But better than silence is to speak on meaningful, productive, beneficial, spiritual topics, specifically those in connection with Lord Krishna. Messages from the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam and so on. But if one doesn't have anything truly spiritually meaningful to say, then better is silence. In the world outside, because there are so many topics going on for discussion, people speak on an unlimited number of topics. In the Srimad Bhagavatam it is explained, Shrotavyadini Rajendra, Nrinam Santi Sahasrashaha, Apashyatam Atmatattvam, Griheshu Grihamedinam. There are people in the world who have no shortage of topics to speak about and to hear. Unlimited topics. Nrinam Santi Sahasrashaha, thousands of topics to speak and hear about. So these people who absorb their consciousness in speaking and hearing on such materialistic and mundane topics, they do not understand self-realization. Apashyatam, they don't see Atma-tattvam, self-realization. Griheshu Grihamedinam. They are not grihasthas, they are grihamedhis, meaning that their medha or their intelligence is absorbed only in worldly affairs, only in materialistic affairs. And materialism comes in many shades and forms and varieties. There is atheism, there is agnosticism, there is this ism, that ism. So many isms in this world which have nothing to do with our ultimate benefit in life. So people are absorbed speaking and hearing about these topics. And because people speak and hear these things, they also remember these things. And their consciousness is affected by what they speak and what they hear. This is a very, very important thing because speech, like the sense of speech, like any of our other senses, can be very important for us to progress in our life. So let's see what Lord Krishna has to say about speech. Because speech is an irrepressible urge. It's a pushing, it's called a vega. In the Nectar of Instruction, Srila Rupa Goswami in the very first verse speaks about Vacho Vegam, Manasah Krodha Vegam. So there are many vegas, many pushings from inside, specifically 6 that Srila Rupa Goswami talks about. And the very first one is Vacho Vegam, the urge to speak. And he says that unless one has controlled the 6 urges, including the urge to speak, one cannot be self-realized. One cannot accept, followers in this world. I remember one joke from one devotee. He said that there was one doctor who kept on his table and in his clinic many thermometers. Now one patient came and he saw the multitude of thermometers kept there. So he, out of curiosity, asked the doctor, "Doctor, why do you keep so many thermometers here? You only see one patient at a time. And maybe there's another patient in the waiting, then maybe another thermometer at the most, maybe 3, but you seem to have dozens of thermometers here. So what's the secret? What's the reason for that?" So the doctor said, "You see, I have a small clinic. And when patients come, I ask my nurse, my assistant, my nursing assistant, that as soon as they come, just go and put a thermometer in their mouth." They said, "Why?" "Because at least they'll keep quiet." So once you got a thermometer in your mouth, then have you tried speaking when you have a thermometer in your mouth? It's not so easy. So he says, that's the only way I can keep this clinic peaceful and calm, because otherwise the people are waiting, they just chat and they speak so loudly. So yes, we all understand, we have experience of this, of the urge to speak. And anything that is uncontrolled must be controlled. It must be regulated. So the voluntary acceptance of control and regulation in our life, be it for the body, be it for the mind, be it for our speech, our activities and so on, is called austerity or tapasya. We do this for the sake of achieving some higher objective. Even on the material platform, people accept inconveniences in their life voluntarily because they want to earn their livelihood, because they have to raise a family, and they have to have relationships in the world, or if someone wants to become a sports person, etc. They have to accept inconveniences because they know there is some objective to be attained, which they feel is important or desirable. So similarly, for spiritual purposes, we also accept some inconveniences, some restrictions on ourselves. This is called tapasya, tapo divyam, divya tapasya, divine austerity, or austerities that are meant for some spiritual attainment, as opposed to austerities that are performed for some materialistic attainment. Actually, those things are not, truly speaking, called austerities. They should not be, because the word austerity primarily refers to austerities done for a spiritual purpose. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna speaks about 3 kinds of austerities: austerities of the body, austerities of the mind, and austerities of speech in the 17th chapter. So since our topic today is on speech, we're not going to consider about austerity of the body and the mind. We'll be speaking about austerities of speech. And this is naturally an important question, because Arjuna wants to know how a spiritual person acts, how a spiritual person walks, or restrains his senses, or acts and employs his senses. Arjuna wants to know from Krishna how a spiritualist speaks and what kind of language he employs. So this is a question that is asked by Arjuna, a very important question. So let's chant this verse. Please repeat after me. Arjuna uvacha Arjuna uvacha Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha Samadhisthasya keshava Samadhisthasya keshava Sthitadhi kim prabhasheta Sthitadhi kim prabhasheta Kimasita vrajeta kim Kimasita vrajeta kim. Srila Prabhupada's translation, Arjuna said, "O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak, and what is his language? How does he sit, and how does he walk?" Arjuna wants to know how a sthita prajna, one whose prajna or consciousness or intelligence, who is fixed in his intelligence and consciousness, how does he employ his senses? His sense of sight, his sense of smelling, his sense of hearing, his sense of speech, his sense of taste, etc. So when he says, Kim asita, how does he sit? It means how does he restrain his senses? And vrajeta, how does he walk, means how does he employ those senses in various types of activities. And since the sense of speech is so important for us, naturally Arjuna also asks about this. And Srila Prabhupada has given a very illuminating purport. I could paraphrase it, but what better than actually reading aloud the words of our founder Acharya. Very eloquent, very to the point, and instructive. And when it comes to speech, of course, as you know, we should speak what we have learned from authority. So therefore we repeat the words of our Acharyas. This will have spiritual potency and clarity. So Srila Prabhupada explains, quote, in the purport, as there are symptoms for each and every man in terms of his particular situation, similarly, one who is Krishna conscious has his particular nature, talking, walking, thinking, feeling, etc. As a rich man has his symptoms by which he knows he is known as a rich man. As a diseased man has his symptoms by which he is known as diseased. Or as a learned man has his symptoms, so a man in transcendental consciousness of Krishna has specific symptoms in various dealings. One can know his specific symptoms from the Bhagavad Gita. Most important is how the man in Krishna consciousness speaks. For speech is the most important quality of a man. So I repeat, speech is the most important quality of a man, or a woman, or a child, anyone. It is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak. And certainly, a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. The immediate symptom of a Krishna-conscious man is that he speaks only of Krishna and of matters relating to him. Other symptoms that automatically follow. So very important points. Everything has symptoms. A rich person can be understood by certain symptoms. A diseased person can be understood by symptoms. So a spiritual person can be also understood by symptoms. And speech is one of those very important characteristics that make us identify a person's consciousness. Especially whether somebody is spiritual or not spiritual. Somebody may speak spiritual knowledge for some time, but we need not draw a conclusion unless we have seen that person for a length of time and observed that person in different situations. Then we can understand the depth of that consciousness. And Prabhupada makes the important point here that speech is the most important quality of a person. And you've all heard the proverb that fool is revealed only when he opens his mouth and when he starts speaking. Similarly, a wise person. It is only when someone speaks can you understand what this person is all about. What is his consciousness? Just by looking at a person is hard to say. As Prabhupada says here, there may be well-dressed fools. Or there may be people who are not well-dressed, but supremely intelligent. We see in the example of Jad Bharat in the Srimad Bhagavatam, when King Rahugana saw Jad Bharat, he could not understand his exalted spiritual position. He looked just like any ordinary person. He wasn't dressed properly. He didn't seem to behave like a cultured person. So he thought, and moreover, he was his palanquin carrier. He was performing some menial service. So out of pride, King Rahugana presumed wrongly that Jad Bharat was a fool. And especially because he wasn't replying to what King Rahugana was saying. But when Jad Bharat started speaking, then King Rahugana was struck with wonder. He was spellbound. The kind of words of spiritual wisdom that emanated from Jad Bharat's mouth clearly indicated that he was a very spiritual personality. But till such time as Jad Bharat spoke, King Rahugana thought he was a fool. Similarly, there are people from a spiritual point of view, or even from a material point of view in many cases, are foolish. But we can't say. When they start speaking, then we can understand what is what. Who is a fool and who is intelligent. So this verse is very important for us. And as we go along, let us see how Lord Krishna will elucidate this matter by speaking about the austerities of speech. And that is found in chapter 17. This verse that we are going to recite now, the 15th verse of the 17th chapter, is going to be the foundational verse for this 2-day seminar. Our seminar is going to be basically an elaboration of this one verse, because it is so important for us, the austerity of speech. I already mentioned that there is austerity of the body and mind, which we won't be discussing in this seminar. We'll be focusing on the austerity of speech. Austerity of speech means that we need to cultivate this, that we need to develop this, we need to learn and practice speaking like this. So let's see the verse. Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat svadhyayabhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat svadhyayabhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate. So can we have two from the gents and two from the ladies reciting this verse?
Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat svadhyaya vasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate.
Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat svadhyayabhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate.
Anudvegakaram
vakyam
satyam priyahitam chayat svadhyayabhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate.
Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat svadhyayabhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate.
Anudvegakaram, not agitating, vakyam, words, satyam, truthful, priya, dear, hitam, beneficial, cha, also, yat, which, svadhyaya, of Vedic study, abhyasanam, practice, cha, also, eva, certainly, vakmayam, of the voice, tapaha, austerity, uchyate, is said to be. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. Let's read Srila Prabhupada's purport. One should not speak in